I had been married to my husband David for 5 years when his parents, Margaret and Robert, lost their home in a foreclosure and had nowhere else to go. So they moved into our house with the expectation that we would take care of them until they got back on their feet. I was sympathetic to their situation because losing a home is devastating. And I believed in family, believed in helping people when they were down, and believed that my in-laws would appreciate our generosity and treat us with respect and gratitude. I was wrong. So completely and devastatingly wrong. Because from the very first day they moved in, Margaret made it clear that she didn't see me as her daughter-in-law, she saw me as her personal servant. Someone who was there to clean up after her, cook for her, and cater to her every need without any complaints or boundaries. It started with small things, like her demanding that I make her breakfast every morning exactly the way she liked it, or her complaining that the house wasn't clean enough, or her criticizing the way I organized the kitchen or folded the laundry. I tried to be patient, tried to be understanding, tried to remember that she was going through a difficult transition and that she was probably lashing out because she felt powerless and out of control. I told myself that she would eventually settle in, that she would eventually appreciate everything I was doing for her, and that our relationship would eventually improve if I just kept being kind and patient and giving her the benefit of the doubt. But the more I gave, the more Margaret took, and the more she demanded, until I was working full-time, cleaning the house, cooking all the meals, and running errands for her while she sat on the couch watching TV and criticizing everything I did. The situation escalated over the months, and Margaret's behavior went from passive-aggressive comments to outright humiliation in front of friends and family, where she would make jokes about how I was a terrible cook or how I couldn't keep a clean house or how I was lucky that her son had married me because no one else would have put up with my laziness and incompetence. She would invite her friends over and make me serve them tea and snacks. And she would introduce me as her daughter-in-law who helps out around the house rather than as her son's wife or a successful professional with a career of my own. David, my husband, never defended me, never stood up for me, never told his mother to stop treating me like a servant. And whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he would just say, "That's just how she is. Sarah, she's old and she's set in her ways. Just ignore her and don't let it bother you." But it did bother me deeply and profoundly, because I was being treated like I was worthless and unimportant in my own home. And the person who was supposed to love and protect me was doing absolutely nothing to stop it. I started to feel like I was invisible, like my needs and feelings didn't matter, and like I was just a tool that my in-laws used to make their lives more comfortable. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and completely demoralized. And I started to resent David for not standing up for me, resent his parents for treating me like garbage, and resent myself for allowing it to go on for so long. I knew that I couldn't keep living like this, that something had to change, and that I needed to find a way to reclaim my power and my self-respect. Before I completely lost myself in the role of a servant in my own home, I had been quietly enduring the humiliation and disrespect for almost 2 years, suffering in silence while my husband made excuses for his mother and my in-laws treated me like their personal servant. When I made a discovery that changed everything and revealed that I had been holding all the power in this situation without even realizing it. I had been doing some spring cleaning, organizing old documents and filing away important papers when I came across a deed to the house that David and I had been living in for the past 5 years. I remember that we had bought the house together, or so I thought, but when I read the deed carefully, I realized that David had never been on it. The house was solely in my name, purchased with a down payment that I had made before we got married, and David had never contributed a single dollar to the mortgage or the maintenance costs. I sat there on the floor of my office, holding the deed in my hands, feeling a strange mix of shock and relief and empowerment because I realized that I owned the house, that I had complete control over who lived there and who didn't, and that my in-laws had absolutely no legal right to be in my home without my permission. I had been giving them a place to live, a place where they could abuse me and disrespect me, and they had no idea that I was the one holding all the power. I decided in that moment that I was done being a servant, done being humiliated, and done letting my husband and his parents treat me like I was nothing. I was going to take back my power, protect my peace, and remind them exactly who owned the roof over their heads. I didn't confront David or my in-laws immediately because I wanted to be strategic, wanted to give them a taste of their own medicine, and wanted to make sure that they understood exactly what they had done to me and how they had mistreated me for so long. I contacted a lawyer, reviewed my rights as the sole owner of the property, and had the lawyer draw up formal eviction papers that I could serve to my in-laws and David at the same time. I waited for the perfect moment, and it came a few weeks later when Margaret humiliated me in front of a group of her friends, criticizing my cooking, my housekeeping, and my worthlessness as a daughter-in-law. After her friends left, I calmly walked into the living room where Margaret, Robert, and David were sitting, and I handed each of them a copy of the eviction papers with a calm smile that made them all go completely pale. I said, "You have 30 days to vacate my property. The house is in my name. It has always been in my name, and I am no longer willing to tolerate the abuse and disrespect that I have been subjected to for the past 2 years." Margaret started screaming, accusing me of being a liar and a manipulator, but I calmly pulled out the deed and showed it to them, watching their faces crumble as they realized that I had the legal right to do exactly what I was doing. I said, "You have treated me like a servant, humiliated me in front of your friends, and disrespected me in my own home. You don't get to stay here anymore." The next 30 days were chaos, with Margaret and Robert alternately begging, threatening, and trying to manipulate me into letting them stay. But I held firm because I had made up my mind, and I knew that I deserved better than to be treated like a servant in my own home. My husband David was furious and tried to guilt-trip me, telling me that I was being cruel and that I was destroying the family. But I calmly reminded him that he had stood by and watched his mother abuse me for 2 years without ever saying a word in my defense. I said, "You chose your mother over me, David. You let her humiliate me and treat me like garbage, and you never once stood up for me. You can leave with them because I am filing for divorce, and you are not welcome in my home anymore." David was shocked, devastated, and completely unprepared for the finality of my decision. But he knew that I wasn't going to change my mind because he had seen me endure the abuse for 2 years without saying a word, and he had assumed that I would just keep taking it forever. On the final day of the eviction notice, I hired a moving company to help Margaret and Robert pack their belongings, and I watched them load up their car and drive away from my house for the last time. I didn't feel guilty, didn't feel sad, and didn't feel like I had done anything wrong because I had given them a chance. And they had used my kindness as an excuse to abuse me. After my in-laws left, I filed for divorce from David, and the process was messy and exhausting. But I walked away with the house, my career, and my self-respect. And I never looked back because I had already given them more than they ever deserved. I eventually found a partner who treats me with respect and love, and I made sure that I never put myself in a position where I would be taken advantage of or abused by anyone again. I think about those years of being treated like a servant by my in-laws, and I feel a deep sense of pride in myself for finally standing up and reclaiming my power, because it was not easy and I was terrified of the consequences. But I knew that I couldn't keep living like that and that I deserved better. The best revenge against people who treat you like a servant is to remind them who actually owns the roof over their heads, and then take it away from them because they are the ones who burned that bridge, not you. I don't speak to David or his parents anymore, and I don't miss them because they made their choices and I made mine. I chose to protect my peace, to value myself, and to never let anyone treat me like I was less than I was worth. The best revenge against people who treat you like a servant is to remind them who actually owns the roof over their heads, and then take it away from them. You don't owe anyone your peace, your dignity, or your home just because they share your last name.